Welcome to Live the Dream with yours truly, Marty Kaiser. Buckle up and let's get started. Happy Friday, everyone. This is Marty Kaiser with episode 7 of Real Estate Tidbits, Live the Dream. I hope everyone's having a great week. This has kind of been a interesting week on a number of reasons, but as a continuation of what we've been chatting about, the real estate changes are in full throttle now. They've been operating for about 2 weeks, and I've got a couple of brief observations about how they're doing in the Central Florida, Orlando area. There's been, I would say, a variety of outcomes. I'd say agents that are experienced in the business, that really have done their homework, research, understand all the new nomenclature, paperwork, how to properly explain this to consumers, both buyers and sellers, I think have done a smooth transition. Where I've noticed some confusion is the less able agents, maybe they're less experienced, did less research, have not done a great job communicating to their customers, have had more issues. I know I've gotten some paperwork from other agents in the past 2 weeks that's been lacking in some crucial details. I don't mind, obviously, helping newer agents and correcting them, but it's so important that these things are done correctly to do a couple things, really just to avoid any confusion, but more importantly, should these files ever get audited or any legal proceedings ensue in the future, you want to make sure all your I's and T's are dotted and that all your paperwork was done correctly. So hopefully those things will improve for the agents that are having a little bit more problems adapting. Regarding real estate in general, a couple of observations of mine. Interest rates have come down slightly, which is a good sign. There is conjecture that the Fed may do some adjusting of the rates in September and hopefully reduce them a little bit. I would say the expectation is that real estate rates will come down in 2025, and accordingly, I think you'll see real estate demand increase, and you probably will see prices increase because there's a relationship between increased demand, lower interest rates, and prices increasing. So those are all great news for not only consumers but the economy. As I've mentioned previously, however, if you're a buyer on the fence and you're waiting for interest rates to come down, you have an important decision to make. Certainly, if interest rates come down a little bit, your affordability will increase from the standpoint of what your monthly payments are going to be. But on the reverse side of that, you're going to have a lot more competition with other buyers, and the prices of homes are going to go up. So it may be a strong consideration for you to consider getting ahead of the curve and starting to look for homes now and not waiting until these other signs improve, because you may ultimately have a harder time finding something that really meets all your criteria. Some of the things that I've noticed over the past couple months are inventory in what I refer to as the popular, more sought-after areas due to lifestyle, location, school rankings, commute convenience, things that are important to consumers. They've stayed very popular and prices have held. However, the time on the market is starting to increase somewhat. My observations on what is causing that are 4 factors. Number one, some consumers are pricing their homes a little bit higher than they should be, as the market is not in a runaway fashion like it was a couple years ago. And accordingly, some of these folks that are pricing it on the high side are not doing the other items that are going to help their house sell quicker and for a higher price. By that I mean making sure that their presentation is optimized on the property, that the photography that the realtor employs is quality, it's showing off the best aspects of the property, is plentiful so that customers can see a lot of the home and not having to guess, employing 3D technology when it's applicable, as a lot of consumers prefer that, and last but not least, providing good access to your property. There's a percentage of sellers, believe it or not, that make showing their home a little bit more challenging. And you want to make your home as accessible as possible. In what I call more of a neutral market like we're in, every component makes a difference. So it's important that all members of the team, so to speak, the real estate broker, the real estate agent, and the sellers, optimize all the things to put the home in the most favorable state. And so this is going to be, to me, an increasing factor, even when the market does improve, because of all the new changes in real estate and buyers having to be more aware of things and fees being discussed a lot more in detail to all the consumers of a transaction. It's going to be imperative that people project and market their home in the most ideal fashion. I'm going to deviate from real estate for a minute, and I wanted to go over a couple things. Obviously, the last month has showed both political conventions, the Republican convention, which took place about a month ago, and the Democratic convention, which started this past Tuesday and is going to be over this evening. Obviously, these are big extravaganzas. Both parties spend a ton of money to try to attract voters and put not only their candidates but their parties in the most favorable light. At the same time, the networks are giving round-the-clock coverage. And, of course, depending on what network you listen to, each network has their own bias in terms of their position on which party and which candidate are offering better solutions to the American voter. A couple things that I like to equate when it comes to politics and real estate. I've always tried to conduct my real estate business, and I also try to have society do this in a win-win situation, meaning that hopefully everything that you try to do is good for both sides. Not everybody's going to agree on everything, but you want to come at it from a positive fashion. You always want to treat others the way you want to be treated. I think that is so important, and it's really just as important in real estate, because even though you have a seller and you have a buyer, and obviously each side is looking out for their own interest, if it's a one-sided transaction, the transaction may not come to fruition because the side that's not being treated equally is not likely to agree to the terms. And secondly, you want everybody in the transaction, at the end of the transaction, to have a positive, favorable feeling about it. So I always try to stress that it needs to be a win-win situation. At the same time, on most transactions, there's two real estate brokers or agents involved. And again, you want to have everybody in the transaction feeling good about things. It's kind of like the old analogy, is the glass half full or half empty? And the same thing if we revert back to politics. In my opinion, you want to come up with potential solutions to problems, because there are always going to be problems in society. But you want to try to employ those solutions to do a couple things, in my estimation. Number one, they need to be in a positive fashion to improve on things, not denigrating the opposition, but actually trying to improve things. Obviously, both sides may have completely different solutions to problems, but they need to be presented in a positive fashion. Secondly, we need to look at things that are going to be more what I call positive, in the sense that we don't want to have a doomsday scenario. It's the same thing in real estate. If I'm meeting with a consumer, whether the market's bad or good, I will explain the reasons why I have my own evaluation of the market, and I back that up with data, and I try to be very detailed about it, because if you're going to give strong opinions on things, you have to have factual data, and you have to tell what I consider accuracy and the truth. The truth will always set you free, as they say, so I've always tried to do that. At the same time, if things are going in a somewhat negative trajectory, that needs to be explained, and you need to, when you're giving your recommendations to people, try to explain how you're going to counteract that, how you're going to improve that. But at the same time, you have to take that into account. A couple years ago, when prices were rising at the rate of 1.5% to 2% a month, that had to be taken into account by all parties to a real estate transaction. Now, as prices are staying pretty flat, that has to be taken into account. And every transaction, you want to get the maximum return for your customer. But these variables have to be factored into whatever recommendations you're going to give. And it's just, you want to do things in a positive way, because to me, you don't want to give recommendations by trying to scare people. You just want to have the factual data to correlate to the opinions that you're going to give. And probably if I'm faulted for anything, it's having too much information for people. I'd rather overeducate my customers and provide a lot of data so there's no doubt in their minds that, number one, I know my business, and number two, when I'm giving them opinions, they're based on a lot of research and time that I've spent. I don't just come up with random things without the ability to justify those things. And another thing about positivity versus negativity, and this has always been crucial to me ever since I've been in the real estate business, many times I compete with other agents to gain the business of a customer, whether it's a seller or a buyer. They might interview a few agents, and based on their interaction with those agents and all the information shared with them, how their personalities meshed, and their overall evaluation of that agent will determine in large measure on which agent that consumer is going to pick to work with. And that's how it should be. Now, I've always had the position that I am going to promote my merits, skills, experience, truthfulness, and all the things that people want. What I try to always stay away from is criticizing anybody that I'm competing with, because I'm going to sell my merits. I'm not going to sell against my competition. And I think sometimes, not only in real estate, but in other aspects of society, there is way too much emphasis on criticizing the opposition rather than having a story about yourself or your credentials that is the reason that the customer is going to hire you. I just think that negativity is so counterproductive, and to me, it's very unprofessional. If you have to criticize an opposing position as a reason why you should be hired, then you really don't have the confidence or the information about why you're selling your position. You're just being uber critical. And our society over the years has just gotten so adversarial and critical of one another. Social media has also had an impact on that. And I'm just hoping that the younger generation ultimately will revert back to a more positive way to conduct themselves and conduct business. And that is just, I can't really emphasize that enough. Another thing that I wanted to chat about a little bit, because it's kind of taken on a little bit of a personal note, is senior health. And I know that's not really related to real estate. The reason that it's on my mind is a couple reasons. I've had a couple customers lately that are going to be selling their homes for two reasons. Number one, they want to downsize. Number two, they feel they're at a point in life that they want a low-maintenance lifestyle. They don't want to have the responsibility and headaches of home ownership. In many cases, they want to be near family if they're not currently living with family. And lastly, with some of these situations, they feel they need to be in a lifestyle that they have more assistance. It could be independent living, but with medical assistance nearby if they need. It could be in a situation where they have their meals prepared for them, or for people that maybe are having somewhat of a physical or cognitive challenge, they may want to be in an assisted living type of environment. And for people that maybe have had parents that are going through those life transitions, it can be quite expensive. And then you have to worry about the quality of care that a relative of yours may be receiving. So I'm personally involved in that because my mom and stepdad are at that point now where their physical conditions are deteriorating somewhat due to pretty much just aging, and also their cognitive skills are diminishing, especially their short-term memory and such. And recently, my mom had to undergo surgery for a fall she took from probably not having as much awareness of her balance not being what it once was. And at the same time, now that she's getting professional care in a facility that's conducive to that, I was actually just notified right before this show that from her knees down to her feet, they're all swollen, and she doesn't have a lot of feeling in them. So obviously that's a big concern for a number of health reasons. And those conditions were not prevalent previously. In fact, the surgeon that conducted surgery on her ankle where she had the fracture from her fall said she was healing quite well and that she could start weight-bearing activities by wearing a boot. Then all of a sudden, like 4 days later, she's having all these swelling and numbness things. So my first thought is, this couldn't have just started this morning. Why wasn't it reported previously from her caretakers? Because she's in a facility that's supposed to be one of the better ones in Maryland, and she's supposed to be getting regular ongoing maintenance and oversight. So it's concerning to me that all of a sudden, and I saw pictures of her legs and feet, they were extremely noticeable that they weren't the way they were a few days ago. So it's so important nowadays to not only try to maintain your health, but if you're relatives or children of people that are starting to have health issues, it's tough. It's not only expensive, but it's stressful because you probably have your own families. And it's so important to try to put your parents in the best proper environment that you can, given the time constraints you may have, the financial constraints you may have, or you could be in a different state from your parent as well. So those type of events are occurring a lot more as our population ages. I just thought I'd give an observation of that because everything in some fashion is related. A lot of things that I encounter in real estate can relate to something that's not in real estate. There's always reasons for people's behaviors. And again, now that politics and an election are at the forefront, as the election is in less than 3 months now, these things all have a symbiotic relationship, and especially when you observe how people treat each other, it's certainly a concern of mine. So those are some of the things I wanted to cover today. I'll leave it on a little bit lighter note. I'm a big sports fan, as you may or may not have noticed from my previous podcasts. So the NFL season's getting ready to start. It should be exciting for football fans. And all the fantasy football drafts, I'm sure you know people that are in fantasy football. It's kind of an escape from reality. It's an inexpensive way to put another way you observe football games. And I must admit, I am in a fantasy football league, and it's a lot of fun for me. So we're having our fantasy draft this coming Sunday, and I'm looking forward to it. That's all for today. I hope everybody is doing well. Have a great weekend. I hope you're enjoying the shows. Please feel free to respond with any questions or topics you would like. And again, please tell all your friends and family about my podcast. Again, this is Marty Kaiser with Real Estate Tidbits. I can be reached at marty@floridasells.com. Live the dream and take care.